Shalom, guys. This is Onieh, and today we are here once again to learn some more Hebrew. So we're going to focus on verbs in the beginning. So let me get the information pulled up. Now, last time we read specifically from the Hebrew Hebrew for Christians website. This time we're going to be reading from the PDF file of that book that we've been reading through. Okay. Let's pull that up. I'm just going to get the chapter or page number. Okay, the page is all right, let's try 140. It's supposed to be 113, page 113. So I'm trying page 140 because the page numbers aren't quite the same. Okay, so let's try 160. There we go. It's page 160. Okay. So now it's time to share a screen. All right. So right here we have conjugations. So scholars call the simple conjugation, they call it call. If you ever see that, QAL, that's a transliteration of a Hebrew word called kal, and that word means light. And it's light because it's not loaded down with all the different conjugations. It's just a simple, plain conjugation. The simple conjugation is well named because in comparison with the others, its form is the simplest or lightest, and the action which it expresses is equally simple. For some reason, the scholars like to use the verb killed for the examples of the different Hebrew like conjugations for verbs. I don't know why they picked killed, but so it's called the katal forms. They basically use a word as an example to show all the different conjugations of the different ways you could say the verb. So you could pick any verb and use it as your example, but instead they picked this particular word to kill. Now it says, see, this is the footnote. When we simply want to designate a verb, we often translate the form of the perfect third person by the infinitive to kill. It is common practice to designate a Hebrew verb by the third person, masculine singular, of kal, except for verbs ayin wa and ayin yod, which one designates by the infinitive construct. So we'll look at that a little bit. But, okay, so in addition to the conjugation of the simple, intensive, or causative action, intensive or causative action can be in one of the three voices: active, passive, and reflexive. Remember, I was talking about that on the practice session on Monday. So he was made to kill, that's causative. Or he was caused to kill. The table of the actual conjugations may be presented in the following fashion. Okay, so simple action, he killed. passive, it tells us to look at section 58A. Reflexive is he killed himself. He was killed. Intensive. So this is called the PL and PUL forms, and this is the HITPL. Okay, he killed intensely. He was killed intensely. He killed himself intensely. Now, I'm not sure why. So see, the difference between these two is they're having what's it called? Vowel markings distinguish between these two forms, active and passive. But from my understanding, passive actually should be the noon, the nifal. So I'm not sure why they have pual as passive. But so we have he made kill, and one has caused him to kill. Again, I'm not quite sure. I understand the distinction they're making here between active and passive, because my understanding was that passive uses the nifal form. So these ones I'm a little bit confused about. So I'll have to look up more about these later. This second column in particular. First column I know, and reflexive I know. This middle column I'm confused about. So corresponding to what we call tenses, Hebrew has two forms. They're saying perfect and future. It's the correct form is actually, I don't know why they say future, but it's perfect and imperfect, not future, but imperfect. So in the simple conjugation, perfect is he killed or he has killed, and they're calling it future, he will kill, but that's not quite correct. It can also be he did kill in the past, and he does kill right now. So it's not accurate to call it the future tense, like they're saying. From the point of view of moods, the perfect and imperfect, whenever he says future, I'm just going to replace it with imperfect. And the reason for that is other scholars use the imperfect instead of future as the word for this. So I'm going with the other scholars on this and not this particular scholar, because like I said, I don't agree with his characterization of future, because it uses the future tense for things that happened in the past already. So it can't be future. Like let's see, what are some examples here? Let me just hold on. I just want to confirm to make sure, but I'm pretty sure in Genesis chapter 1, and God said, let there be light, the word said is imperfect. So I want to double check that. Yeah, it is. So I'll share the screen again. So I ask you, when it says, and he said, he Elohim, or he God said, when did this happen? Did this happen in the past, or did it happen in the future? Well, it happened in the past, even though it's the imperfect, or what they're calling the future tense. But again, it's not anything to do with the future. It's talking about a past action that's in a imperfect tense. Why does it have, what is this, reverse, forward, and reverse? Oh, okay. And it has Septuagint. Oh, interesting. That's one way to put it. Ooh, I like that much better. Hmm, interesting. So you can look at the different ways that they say it. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, okay. That's, anyways. So yeah, that's why I say it's imperfect. So imperfect are indicative. So the imperfect can have two variations corresponding to volative nuances, namely the jussive mood. We're going to go and explain jussive mood. I'm not sure about today, but we will cover that. If not today, we'll cover that eventually. Okay, so may he make someone kill. And the cohortative mood, I want to kill. But cohortative is not quite correct. It should actually be, instead of I want to kill, it should be translated I shall kill. Cohortative basically is like, it's imperative for the first person. So like imperative means you do this. You, so it's you and the verb, but you don't have to write you in English. So for example, in English, you'd say kill them. What you're actually saying is, you guys kill them. You shall kill them. You kill. That's what you're saying when you say kill in Hebrew in the imperative form. But if you have a cohortative, what's called a cohortative mood, you're saying I kill, as in I shall kill. You're basically commanding yourself to kill someone. Besides these temporal and modal forms, there are two atemporal and amodal forms, which partake of the nature of both verb and noun, as the infinitive and the participle. Infinitive is an action noun with the force of a verb. Just like in English, we have infinitives. There's the infinitive absolute and the infinitive construct. And the participle partakes of both the nature, partakes of the nature of both verb and adjective. It can designate the agent, the one who performs the action, or the patient. Up, Steve's off. Let's see if he comes back. Or the patient, the one who suffers the action. Let me just message Steve to double check. Oh, and Melissa, you were saying something right as we were starting. So if you want, you can type it in the chat.
I was talking about the weather.
Oh, very, very nice topic. So I don't know where Steve is. I just sent him a message and hopefully he comes back. But we will not be covering participles today because those are more complicated. And likewise, infinitive, we're not going to be covering today. We'll be covering it at a different time. But we're just looking at what it says for those, just like as an initial introductory to the concept. In simple conjugation, we have so far spoken of action only. But in fact, apart from verbs of action or active verbs, there are verbs of state or stative verbs expressing a state or quality. So like, so basically, like, you know, there's verbs like he killed, or he loved, he kissed, blah, blah, blah. They're actions that they're doing to someone else or to an object. Whereas there's other verbs which kind of like basically means something along the lines of like as they say, expressing a state or quality. So the verb here is kabod or kabit, and it means he is heavy or he was heavy. So actually, let's take a look where it's used in the Bible. So first, we're going to find this word. We're first going to look at the noun, and then we're going to look at we're going to go to the verb root of it. Okay, kabed or kabid. They say comes from the verb kabid or kabad. Okay, and so to be heavy. So we take a look at where it's used. And Abraham was very rich in cattle, in silver and gold. It's actually heavy. Basically, it's like, and Abraham was. Let's take. Abraham heavied much or very in cattle. Okay, so but it means was heavy, or like the quality of being heavy. Let's take a look at I want to look at stative verbs in English to see if there's any English examples of stative verbs. So, I'm not seeing any good examples. Man, I hope he comes back. I hope Steve comes back. We'll see. All right, let's go back to the verbs PDF file. So the majority of verbs are triliteral. So what that means is the majority of verbs have 3 letters. The majority of verbs have 3 letters. My screen is being slow at the moment, it looks like. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, like I said, majority of verbs triliteral, 3 letters. Verbs are said to be either strong or weak. Strong verbs have 3 unchangeable root constants or letters. Those letters will always be there, no matter what. The strong verb presents peculiarities of vocalization, or like how to add like vowels, when one radical is guttural. Weak verbs present within their root a weak consonantal or vocalic element. In order to designate these verbs, one uses the letters of the verb payal. Pay ayin lamed. It means to do. And that's an old paradigm originating from scholars who did Arabic grammar. The pay represents the first element, the ayin represents the second, and the lamed represents the third element of the root. So if it says a pay noon verb, what that means is it's a verb that starts with the letter noon. Because in the payal example, payal has 3 letters. Pay is the first, ayin is the second, and lamed is the third. Now, just like the word for kill, katil, is used as an example for other verb forms, the same is the case for the verb pa'il or paril, and it's used to designate each letter to refer to unique forms. So pay verbs are verbs where the first letter is being mentioned. So pay noon verbs are verbs with noon as the first letter, because pay is the first letter, therefore noon is also the first letter of that verb. The other weak verbs are similarly designated. So pay aleph verbs are verbs that start with aleph. Pay yod verbs that start with yod. Lamed aleph verbs are verbs that end with aleph. Lamed hey verbs are verbs that end with hey. And ayin wa verbs are verbs that have the middle letter as a wa, and ayin yod verbs are verbs that have the middle letter to be yod. The designation ayin verbs is given to the geminate verbs, the second radical of which is repeated. So in this example, it's 3 letters, but the last 2 letters are the same letter. So they call those ayin verbs. Sabib. So like it says here, we're going to start with the regular strong verb. It tells us here that whether a verb is transitive or intransitive, those are syntax issues, but they don't affect the pronunciation of the verbs. Transitive and intransitive basically means, can the verb be done to something, or is the verb unable to be done to something? So for example, you can say I saw him, right? I saw him, but you can't say I looked him. You just say I looked at him or looked to him. You can't say I talked him. I talked him. That doesn't make sense. I talked to him, but you can say I told him. But again, you can't say I spoke him. You say I spoke to him. And let's see, any other examples? You can't say I hug to him. You just say I hug him. You can't say I kissed to him. You say I kissed him. And you can't say I know him. You can say I know him, but you can't say I know to him. Now for dogs, you can say I walked my dog and I walked to my dog. But in normal speech, it wouldn't make sense to say I walked my friend. You walked to your friend. You didn't walk your friend. So that's the difference between transitive and intransitive. Transitive means it's being transferred to something. Intransitive means it cannot be transferred to it. Let me just double check that's the correct meaning. I want to make sure I'm telling you the right thing because I could have gotten it reversed. So let me just double check here. Transitive. And where is Steve? I don't understand. Yeah, so transitive means, actually I did it reversed. I think. Hold on. Oh, they're not giving good examples here. Let me look at Wikipedia. Transitive verb Wikipedia. I thought I just. All right, let's share the screen again. In English. All right, it's being slow at the moment, my page. Okay. Following sentences exemplify transitive verbs in English. You need to fill in this form. Hang on, I'll have it ready in a minute. The professor took off his spectacles. So they're direct objects. But now intransitive, intransitive verbs do not have objects. So okay. Some verbs they say for English are called ambitransitive. They allow for objects, but do not always require one. Such a verb may be used as intransitive in one sentence and as transitive in another. So I'm pretty sure I'm still right that indirect objects are intransitive. But it's also telling us that not just if it has an indirect object, but also if it doesn't even have an object, that's also an intransitive verb. For English anyways. I'm not sure if that's true for Hebrew. But so now we'll take a look here. So active conjugation comprises active verbs and stative verbs, like was mentioned earlier. So the active verbs are the form katal. So for example, the verbs give, sit, and eat are active verbs. In the imperfect, the second vowel is generally U in strong verbs. Let's see here. Some verbs can also express a reflexive action. So for example, rahits or rihats means both to wash something else and to wash yourself. Like I'm gonna wash. You would say to someone, or like I'm gonna shower. Hey guys, I'm gonna shower, or I'm gonna bathe. You can use it to talk about yourself.
It's
or,
about
or you can say it to someone about someone else. I'm gonna wash my dogs, or I'm gonna wash my children. Same thing with pour, the verb pour, which is sawik or not, or yeah, it's either sawik or sok. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. Then you have anoint, which is mishah. It's the same root word as Mashiach or Messiah, means to anoint, but it can also be to anoint once yourself. So Mashah, you are anointing, you can Mashah others, and you can Mashah yourself. So the verb dip, tibal, to dip or dip oneself. And sarah, to sustain, it also means to sustain yourself. Certain active verbs are denominative. I think what that's saying is denominative. I think it means it's based on the noun. So Liban is the word for or labana is the word for brick, but Liban means to manufacture bricks. And then the word for salt is male, but to salt something is mila. No, it's yeah, mila. So grain apparently is chaber, but to purchase grain is chabar. And the noun tent is kahil, or achel, but the verb form is to pitch a tent or to tent something, which is it's kehal. So hold on, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second because it looks like my one friend Luke is trying to come on in. Let's double check here, or maybe not. Oh, okay. It looks like he's just saying that he's following along. So if you want to actually join the Zoom call, you can, but otherwise you can just watch on the YouTube, Luke. I like people actually coming on to the Zoom, but for some people, maybe Zoom doesn't work for them for some whatever reason. You know, it could be different reasons. It is being streamed live at the same time to my YouTube channel and Facebook. So let's go back to the, Zoom, and you know, maybe Steve's watching through the through live stream as well, but ideally he would sign back on. But let's continue. Now, Akkadian uses the word paris, the verb, to the same way in Hebrew we say katil to do the different forms. Akkadian uses the paris forms. So stative verbs are basically adjectives, which are verbs. That's the best way to explain it. So any noun that's an adjective can be used as a verb, which becomes a stative verb. So stative verbs, they say, have two forms. A more frequent form, katil, he is heavy, and a less frequent form, katul. So for example, okay, this is kibad, and this is ketan, which is he is small. So these two forms of the perfect correspond a single form of the imperfect, not future, imperfect, with the second vowel a. So he will be heavy is it's yakbid, and yakten. No, it's ikbad and or yikbad and ikten or iktan or yiktan. So the reason I'm getting confused is because nouns have the ah sound first in the first syllable and it in the second syllable, whereas verbs have it reversed. Verbs have the I sound in the first syllable and the ah sound in the second syllable. Now I'm making a generalized rule. There's exceptions to that in biblical Hebrew, but I argue in original Hebrew that's how it works. But that's why I'm getting confused sometimes because I'm doing the pronunciation of the noun instead of the verb. So at the earliest stage, all stative verbs must have expressed what, from the point of view of the Semites, was perceived as a state or an attribute rather than an action. But numerous stative verbs actually express what for us would really be an action. I'm not sure how they know that. Like for the word here, they're claiming that that's a stative verb. I don't know if that's correct. I think based on what they're saying earlier, stative verbs are just adjectives that are used as verbs. And the word here is not an adjective. So, but the word heavy is. It could. So the other thing is, keep in mind that the scribes, the Masoretic, they add vowel markings. So they might have added vowel markings to make some of these words sound like stative verbs. So that might be why he said that. Yeah, so some verbs whose perfect bears a vowel characteristic of stative verbs show in the future a vowel typical of active verbs. So apparently, at least in the Hebrew of the Masoretic text, we have different vowels for whether it's a perfect or imperfect. Okay, so it's saying stative verbs. Apparently, stative verbs have the similar sound as the actual nouns. The ah first and then the eh second. A verb, they're saying, which is strictly stative, cannot have a participle, but only a verbal adjective. Verbal adjectives are participles, I'm pretty sure, so that doesn't make sense to me. Or are a form of participle, I should say. But again, we'll be covering participles in a later video. Stative says, as a consequence of the evolution of the stative towards the active, like I said, I'm not sure that guy's conclusion is correct on this, but he says that stative verbs often have participles due to the fact that stative verbs become active verbs over time as language evolves. That's what he says. So there's the participle loving and hating. Sometimes there exists both a participle and a verbal adjective. We say in practice, a stative verb can be identified most surely by the vowel A of the imperfect, provided that this A is not due to any phonetic cause, like a guttural. But in certain verb classes, it will be identified by the vowel I or E of the performative. Preformative is prefix. Less frequently by the vowel E of the perfect, which has often been replaced by A. This is all like tedious stuff that we don't even know how accurate these things are, because the Masoretic scribes added their own pronunciation things and those were not original pronunciations. Changes over time. So these grammar books sometimes give very in-depth information on the pronunciation of dialect of Hebrew that the scribes use, the Masoretic. But that's their dialect. That doesn't mean that that's the original dialect of the Bible writers. So we keep that in mind. The view that the vowel of the future performative was originally A in active verbs and I in stative verbs is rather plausible. Notice it says plausible, which means they don't even know for sure. They're saying it's possible, but likely plausibility, likely possibility is what plausible means. In Hebrew, these vowels do indeed appear when the syllable is open. So for Onieh verbs, oh yeah, so remember I said earlier that an Onieh verb is when the second and third letter repeat, but it's also apparently it also can be applied even when the third letter gets dropped. The third double letter in that verb gets dropped. It's still considered ein verb. Let's see here. Yeah, this is very confusing the way they word it because they don't clearly write they're giving the pronunciation of the vowels by vowel markings, and I hate vowel markings. So that makes it hard for me to keep track of what they're saying in these sentences right here. That's why I'm pausing. So a list of the most common stative verbs. So in the future, I'm making a document every week that I'm sharing on Facebook. A document which provides vocabulary words. So I'm going to be adding these vocabulary words next week into the document file. So we've got attributes. So the word for good is tov, right? But it also, as a verb, as a stative verb, it means to be good. And then the imperfect is yatab. But for some reason, it has two yods here. See, there's like a check mark, and there's only one yod. I think what they're saying is that it's supposed to have one yod, but apparently it has two yods for whatever reason. We have to actually double check that to make sure that's the case in the Bible, but apparently it has two yods. So the word for evil or bad can be a verb. Okay, so they're saying, let's see. Yeah, so to be evil and to be evil in the imperfect has the yod prefix makes it imperfect for third person singular, whereas no yod means it's perfect just for the third person singular. And then for great, we have Gedal. Hold on. So they say, first formulated by Barth, hence they call it Barth's law, the scholars, as yaktul, yaktil, and yikta. So if it's yak, yaktil would be stated. No, wait, what are they saying here? Let me look up Barth's law. Let's check that. I'm not even seeing anything about it. Okay, Barth Ginsburg's law. Let's try that one. Barth Ginsburg law. I actually found stuff for that one. I didn't find anything for Barth law. So this is interesting, but it doesn't show me the whole article. So I need to do some research on this. But if you take a look, Barth Ginsburg law, it says phonological or pronunciation rule stating the prefix vowel of the prefix or imperfective conjugation in the base stem is dependent on the theme vowel of the respective verbal base. When the theme vowel is I or U, the prefix is A, while when the theme vowel is A, the prefix vowel is I, resulting in the following paradigm. We have yiktab and yaktib. But it's not showing me the whole thing. It's really frustrating. Let's see if we Google search this. Let me check this out. Maybe if I do cache, will cache work? Probably not. Yeah, it doesn't work. It's in Encyclopedia of Hebrew Language and Linguistics. Well, Jeffrey Kahn. There's also an online link. See if the online link works. That'd be cool. No, wrong. I didn't realize. Okay. But okay, Jeffrey. Let me just double check this because I want to see what it actually says. And this thing is from the Encyclopedia of Hebrew Language and Linguistics. Okay, it's not showing this. So let's see here. Let's try Google. Oh, do I? Let's see. That sounds really interesting. Let me check. It says logos. So I want to see if I have it on logos. It looks like it's not even on logos yet, but that it's going to be maybe. Oh, there's 4 volumes. I'll have to check this some more on my own time. Oh well. Because so that's going to help me test my theories on pronunciation rules for Hebrew to be able to see what that Barth law is. It's going to help flesh out my theories and test them to see if they're how accurate they are. And also, maybe when I read their theory, when I read their laws, I might get some more insight into pronunciation rules for how like verbs are pronounced in original Hebrew. So that's why it's important for me to see that law that scholars have come up with, because they say the law is applicable to Eblaite and El Emarna, Canaanite as well. So both of those are important for original Hebrew. But it looks like they're saying it's not applicable to Akkadian. So it's possible that this law is not accurate, the Barth law, but we'll have to check and see. Like I said, I'll try to look up that on my own time. I'll try to look up some more about Barth's Ginsburg's law. Sorry, guys, I'm just double checking this. So there is the whole thing about the yod in the beginning of words, whether it's pronounced with a vowel, like as a consonant, the Y, or if it's pronounced as a vowel. So the word for hand, for example, is ID. Is it pronounced yad, Y-A-D, or is it pronounced I-Y-D, Eid? Is it pronounced Eid or Yad? Okay, so here's some more words for stative verbs. There's katin is to be small. Gabe to be high. To be low is chafil. See, these are okay, these are perfect. All right. And then hazik is to be strong. Dal to be weak. And then kabid to be heavy. Ikel to be light. Rahik to be fair. Karib to be near. Nagish is to approach. Dabak dabik is to cling. Teher is to be pure. Tameh is to be impure, and mala to be full. And then mental states, we have love, acheb, or no, achev, or kehev. No, sorry, kehev. And then hapich is to love or desire. Desire is probably the right word. And then chana is hate. And then, oh yeah, okay. So earlier up here where tav has two yods, it's probably because originally yod was for perfect. Because if you go down here, if you go down here, you'll see that to fear is ira, whereas imperfect, there's two yods. So apparently sometimes the verb has an extra yod as part of the verb, even in perfect. And then in the imperfect, it adds the yod to the yod. Hence why it lists two yods. Now, sometimes what I have seen from different grammar books is that when there's two yods, scribes will often remove the one yod and just write one yod. So sometimes they'll write the imperfect the same as the perfect with just one yod. Eager is dread, tremble, herad, or harid. Another word that means tremble is fahid, or no, pachid. And then forget, chakeh. Physical states, to be clothed, labish. Labish, and then to be sated is chabe, to be hungry, ragib, or no, ragib, to be thirsty is jame, jama, to sleep, yashin, to be lying, chakiv, to lose one's children, chakil. And then miscellaneous, various different state of verbs is ikil. So that's to be able to learn, lamid, mit, or myth is to die, shachil, to ask, shachin, to inhabit, chama, to hear or listen, shema, chama. See, now they have it as but why do they render it as shema? Well, let's take a look at the shema. How do they pronounce it in Hebrew? Deuteronomy 6:4. Shema. Shema. So they have it as shema. But apparently when it's a stative, it's the reverse. Okay, so I'm looking at this over again. So it's possible that perfect and imperfect was pronounced differently. Complicating matters is if you actually go to Akkadian and you look at the different verb conjugations, the form for the perfect is called stative in Akkadian. All right, let's go back to the PDF. All right, so now we've got in the inflection of perfects, perfect verbs occurs through the addition of suffixatives or suffixes, in the majority of which one easily recognizes the separate personal pronouns. In the third person, the pronoun is understood. The feminine is marked by A for at, as in nouns, the feminine marker, the plural by you. The form of the perfect seems to have been initially used with stative verbs. Which is actually what it says for Akkadian, interestingly enough. So that's kind of cool that the scholars are saying that, because that illuminates why in Akkadian it says that for stative verbs. Let's see. Okay. The perfect of active verbs is always of the type katal. Let's see here. So again, a lot of complex vowel rules here. And the thing is, if we're trying to read the Bible, we don't need to necessarily have a perfect understanding of pronunciation. So with that said, if this stuff overwhelms you with how to pronounce it correctly, just try to recognize the words, and then if needed, you can come up with your own pronunciation system. But try to model your pronunciation based on what various scholars say about the Hebrew or various dialects. Look at the different dialects or different languages, Semitic languages, and see what works for you in terms of helping you to understand Hebrew better. But ideally, we all try to learn the pronunciation rules in the original from what we can glean, the original was. But that's more the correct pronunciation is more important in terms of communicating with others by communication, like by speaking with them. But by writing words down, we don't need to know the pronunciation. As long as we have the correct words and the correct letters, then we're fine. Yeah, so this is all just like loss of sounds depending on when it's used in words. Yeah, so here what I said about the Akkadian. The origin of the perfect is clearly recognizable in the stative form of Akkadian and Amarna Canaanite. A priority of the imperfect is indicated by the fact that the conjugation of the perfect often takes place on the analogy of the future. Let's see here. Excuse me. So observations on individual endings. The primitive form with a at the end for third person singular masculine is in Arabic and Ethiopian and is still preserved in suffixed forms such as he killed me. It sounds like they're saying that that it does have a sound at the end, even though it's not written. But let's take a look at what Akkadian says, because I go with Akkadian. So yeah, so there's no ending vowel like they're saying. They said it's an Arabic and Ethiopian, but Akkadian doesn't have it, so I go with Akkadian. So the primitive form is tav rather than hey. I've mentioned this before. Hey is is replacing of the original feminine form tav. The tav is preserved before object suffixes and in lamed hey verbs. That means verbs that end in hey, the tav is preserved. One finds other forms with tav. For example, tire will be forgotten, strength is gone, it will return. So sometimes for second singular masculine, hey is written for like I said, for masculine, but other times sometimes it's not written, sometimes it is written. But the pronunciation is the same whether it's written or not. It says the primitive Semitic form is ketalku, that is preserved in Ethiopian or Ge'ez. It has become T under the influence of T of the second person. So this K is preserved in Akkadian as well as Ethiopian. U has become I on the analogy of the separate pronoun and the suffix of the first person. Sometimes, so in Hebrew, first person perfect is tav yod at the end, but sometimes the yod is not written, but it's implied by context that it should be written. That could just be a scribal error. El Emarna glosses attest to the ending ti. So on the paragogic noon, we will discuss that. It looks like section 44E. The primitive form is ketalu for masculine, and the feminine is ketala. But both are spelled with wa. Interestingly, Aramaic apparently distinguishes hey with wa. Let me check that. Okay, that's quite interesting. That's the case. Let's see. Maybe the plural. I'm actually not seeing it here. So I'm not sure what they're saying for that, because I don't see it for Aramaic. Okay, second person plural masculine. The primitive form kataltumu has become kataltim. Primitive form kataltina. They say the primitive form for the first person plural is katalna. Hebrew has replaced na by nu on the analogy of the separate and suffix pronoun. But in Akkadian, the a and u share the same, like basically Hebrew combines the a and u as a single letter. So like the reason for that is wa can be the letter w. So then you would pronounce it as a between the two consonants, you would pronounce it as an ah sound. But so for the verb example katil, you would say kital kital na or kital nu. In Hebrew, you'd spell that both as with a wa, whether it's wa as the letter w or wa as the letter u, the sound of u. So it's almost 11. Let's see how much more we've got here. I want to see where we should stop with this. Okay. All right. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna go down to page 130. Where are we in now? What page are we on now? We're on page 124. No, we're on 123. So yeah, we'll go to page 130. It's talking about stress. I don't understand the stress statements, so I have to research stress. Yeah, all this stuff about stress goes over my head. So I'll have to do more research on what that means. But the inflection of cal future, which is actually imperfect, like we talked about earlier. So the inflection, the word inflection means like how it's spelled in different forms. So the inflection or spelling of the cal imperfect consists of performatives, which is prefixes, marking the person, and in 5 cases by suffixes or subformatives, marking the gender and the number. So the person is marked by the prefix, and the gender and number is marked by a suffix. The perfect can be described morphologically or by spelling as the suffix tense. The future can be described as the prefix tense. So the preformatives or prefixes, aleph and nun of the first person and t of the second person are also attested in the corresponding separate pronouns. In contrast, the prefixes yod and tav of the third person are difficult to explain. The suffix wa of the second and third person, plural masculine, is the same for the feminine singular. One has the suffix yod in the second person. For the feminine plural, na in the second and third persons. We talked about this, how in Akkadian, that's not the original forms. Na is not the original forms. The original forms are not wa for the third person plural, and hey for second person plural. It's not na. But the Hebrew form became na over time for some reason. So the perfect has a nominal base and looks like a conjugated adjective or substantive. The future is formed on a verbal base. Or the imperfect, as we talked about. So the imperfect is therefore an essentially verbal form in origin, like the imperative, whereas the perfect corresponds more with an adjective form or substantive. What's substantive? Substantive is essence. Substantive. It doesn't really help. Okay. Okay, nouns, substantive. Nouns are substantive. Okay. Basically what it's saying is that the perfect tends to use forms which look like noun, like that it's deriving from noun root, whereas imperfect uses forms which seem to derive from a verb root. That's what they're claiming. I don't know how true that is, but that's what they say. In the Cal conjugation of regular verbs, the first vowel is, it looks like I in verbs of action and stative verbs alike. But as we stated in section 41E, the original vowel in active verbs was probably A, they claim. I don't know how true that actually is, but like I said, I have to look up the rule, Barth's rule, supposedly. Yeah, and see, some prefer prefix conjugation or suffix conjugation instead of performative and sufformative. In the first person singular, one has, okay, that's just vowel marking. The second vowel of active verbs is generally U or ah, sometimes I. So based on that, it seems to me that the okay, so like I said before, for regular nouns, it's first. The first syllable is the second syllable is it. But for verbs, the first syllable is second syllable is but apparently the adjective form or the perfect might actually have it reversed, just like a noun where comes first and is second. Let's see what we got here. In the feminine plural, the third and second persons have the same form, na. As a second person form, it is extremely rare, as is the second plural feminine of the perfect. In the third person, has a twofold indication of the feminine. Tav here is a secondary origin and originates with the third singular feminine. The original form must have been with a yod. So in Arabic and Old Aramaic, okay, this is very interesting. Okay, guys, so we're gonna look here. Let's see here. So apparently Arabic, right? So in Hebrew, third person, the third person feminine plural is the prefix is tav and the suffix is nun hey. But in Arabic and Old Aramaic, instead of a tav prefix, it's a yod. And not only that, but this apparently this form occurs 3 times in the Old Testament. It's so that's interesting. The na form, including that of imperative, has completely disappeared from Mishnaic Hebrew. And as early as in Biblical Hebrew, the masculine you form often doubles for the feminine. But if you look in Akkadian, that's the way it originally was. Akkadian, wa occurs for both masculine and feminine instead of na. And in Akkadian, it's yod instead of tav. So again, we look at the Akkadian. We've got here third person feminine plural. It's yod at the beginning and wa at the end, not na at the end and not tav at the beginning. So Arabic and Old Aramaic have the yod in the beginning, but they still have na apparently at the end. But yeah, so instead of the ordinary spelling na, we often find end, especially in the Pentateuch and notably after wa inversive. Now look, nun looks like a wa, doesn't it? Right? Actually, I don't know. I was gonna say, yeah, I don't think that's gonna work. I was gonna say that maybe the form na originates from a confusion of the original letter. I don't know, maybe it still might. Oh, let's see. Yeah, because I don't know. So what I was gonna say is that at least in this square script, the final nun looks like a wa letter. So the original form for Akkadian is wa. But in Hebrew, in that square script, it looks like a final nun. And then in Hebrew, you often add an extra vowel at the end, even though it's not written sometimes. So the sound that you add at the end is often an ah sound. An example of this for Hebrew is if you go to the, we're going to go to their Hebrew for Christians thing, and I'll show you where the ah sound is added. Speak a little slow at the moment. So this website also does the state of verbs. I'll have to look at that in my spare time. But so we take a look. Notice here, tav, second masculine singular, they're adding the letter A at the end, but with the vowel marking. So shin mem resh tav, but it's pronounced as shim mem resh tav ah. So there's an extra ah that's not written in the text, but it's pronounced. So just like you could have tav with a ah after it, you can also have noon with an ah after it. So I would argue that the final letter noon was followed by a ah sound, and therefore that's where the na comes from. It comes from the letter wa being misread as a noon, and then the sound of ah is made, and then eventually it's written down. The problem with that theory is that only applies to square Hebrew. When that theory, when these languages, like Old Aramaic, for example, was written in Paleo Hebrew, not in the square script. So let's see. Hebrew script. Let's take a look here. See, when did it appear? This square variant of Aramaic developed into the Hebrew alphabet proper during the Second Temple period. The script is used in the kingdoms of Israel and Judah as well as throughout Canaan. By the 6th or 5th centuries, the script had diverged into numerous national variants. Aramaic script. Let's take a look at this. The Aramaic alphabet was adapted by Arameans from the Phoenician alphabet, became a distinct script by the 8th century. It was used to write the Aramaic language and had displaced the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. Oh, Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. Okay, let's see. I still think this is correct, my theory. So, like I said, originally it was wa, and then the final noon form looks like a wa, and then the hey, the ah sound was being pronounced, so they started writing that as a letter hey, and that's where it originates from. Occasionally, interesting. Occasionally, tav with a prefix and wa with a suffix occurs for third person feminine plural, with tav indicating the feminine singular and you the plural respectively. That occurs in Ezekiel and Job in those two verses. It might occur in other verses as well, but they only list two here. Added to the suffix wa of the third person plural masculine and second plural masculine, we often find a noon called paragogic noon. It says in reality, the noon belongs to primitive forms and is found in Ugaritic, Arabic, Aramaic, and some other cognates. Total of 305 examples are reasonably widely spread in the Old Testament, but most are found in Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Job, and Psalm 104. The presence of a form with un can be due to the antiquity of a text, a deliberate archaism or meter. But the usual reason seems to be preference for a fuller and more emphatic or expressive form. Okay, what did I say? See, with that noon form, okay. Yeah, that noon form they're saying occurs in Ugaritic, Arabic, Aramaic, but it doesn't say that for Akkadian, so I'm not sure. The paragogic thing, I've read about it before, and it's confusing to me, so I have to do more research on that whole paragogic thing. It's just the fact that no long form, the or with the paragogic noon at the end, it does not occur with the prohibitive aleph lamed, which means no or not. And extremely rarely, it only occurs 8 times with the inversive wa, accords with the general assumption that the short form, just the wa, represents the original jussive or preterite. It says in biblical Aramaic, as in early Aramaic generally, where we always find wa noon in the indicative, the noon is eliminated where the sense requires the jussive. So apparently this might be more of an Aramaic form rather than a Hebrew form. Although there is some evidence that early Hebrew may have had some Aramaic forms as well. But it's also possible that some of the Aramaic forms just come from later scribes, borrowing from Aramaic, just like we see in English, where we borrow from different languages. Sometimes a paragogic noon is added to the suffix yod on the second person singular feminine. But there are not many examples of this, but for example, in Ruth, it occurs a few times. This noon is also primitive and occurs in Arabic and Aramaic. Let me take a look at the Aramaic grammar again. Yes, we've got the noon at the end. We see the noon right here, noon right here. Noon, noon. Yeah, see, look, it's the, wait, hold on a second. See, the thing that's confusing is they write two forms here. See, two forms. And then for the imperfect, they have wa noon for third person masculine plural, and for the feminine, it's also a noon second person masculine, wa noon. So the noon forms seem to just be from Aramaic. Let's check Arabic. Arabic. What? Arabic verbs. They have a whole different article. I just want the main forms. They have so much stuff here. Okay. Two, ta, t, okay. We're looking at imperfect. Where's it? Okay. It says energetic. See, energetic. See how there's noons added to these forms, whereas the normal forms don't have the noon, but energetic adds the noon forms. So let's take a look at the energetic. expresses strongly believed, which the speaker wishes to emphasize. So it looks like the paragraph noon, according to this article, means like intensive, like emphatic, especially. So I'll go with that for now, for paragraph noon, but more research is needed for that. The cohortative is a volitive mood of the first person. So remember I said it basically means I shall. You're declaring what you are doing. It's like imperative to yourself. It is formed by adding a hey at the end as well. So aleph, kaf, tet, and lamed by itself means I kill. I do kill, I did kill, or I will kill. But cohortative, I shall kill, is you write it by adding hey at the end. And again, it talks about stress, but I got to do research on stress. Stress is related to pronunciation, kind of like accent type thing. Let's see. So like, for example, like, and this is just off the top of my head, you have the English word middle. Is it pronounced middle, or is it pronounced let's see. Well, you have like different like ups and downs, like medill, medill, middle. So like there's ups and downs, and so that might be what like the stress is talking about, or that could be accent actually. But like in English, you know, we say different words like in different directions. Like I am going to the store. You wouldn't say like I'm going to the store. Like if you're doing it as a question, I am going to the store, or whereas if you say I'm going to the store, that's a different emphasis. So there's some type of that in Hebrew as well, where you pronounce things with different emphasis. But that goes over my head. I need to study that more because that's more complicated pronunciation rules. A volitive nuance of the cohortative can be reinforced by the particle na, nun aleph. Exodus 3:3. Let's take a look. And says Moses, I will turn aside now. So it kind of basically means now. Na means now. So if we take a look, I shall now, basically is what it means. So Jessive is the volative mood of the third person. It's basically the same thing, I shall, but it's he shall. But how do we know it's a Jessive? Apparently, it sounds like it's saying most of the time, Jessive is not distinguished in the actual spelling. It's only distinguished in vowel markings. It says, okay, so cohortative is of the first person. It says on a rare occasion it can be used for third person. The hey ending can be used for third person, apparently. Now, jussive is the normal way for the third person, but it's not clear how we can tell it's jussive. The distinct jussive form is found particularly in certain weak verb classes, such as verbs that have a wa in the middle or a yod in the middle. In verbs that have a hey at the end, the hey usually gets dropped. So the indicative yod, gimel, lamed, hey becomes in the jussive yod, gimel, lamed. Okay, so it looks like what it's saying is it shortens the forms. It says very rarely the jussive has the paragogic. Most of the time it doesn't. Paragogic noon. Okay, almost done, guys. So the inverted future or the inverted imperfect has a strong wa. With the wa inversive, the verb form undergoes two changes in accordance with the phonetic laws. The vowel reflects shortening, and the stress falls on a different syllable. Oh, so here's an example of this might be stress, potentially. I'm just guessing, but so like if you say she saw versus she saw something versus she saw something. So you said it's a different emphasis, different stress. But I'm guessing what stress means. So I'll do research on what stress is. Okay, so they're not explaining here like there's something called the wa inversive, and they haven't explained it in this section. So I'm confused why they didn't explain it. I'll have to check to see if it's explained in the PDF somewhere, but we'll go over that next time. Imperative is the volative mode of the second person, which is you shall. The inflection of the imperative consists of, wait, hold on. Oh yeah, I'm not going to do imperative. Why not? No, let's see. I mean, okay, so next time, we're going to end here. So next time, what I'm going to probably do is do a short recap of the cohortative and the jussive, because they go together with the imperative. So we'll cover that next week. And then we will look at different forms for, let me just show you guys the table of contents in terms of what the plan is for next Thursday. Okay, so what we've got here is like I said, we're going to do imperative, and we're going to do recap of cohortative and jussive. All right. And then we're going to look at well, I guess we'll do infinitive. Okay, we'll try infinitive. We're going to skip participles. And we're going to do, okay, so we'll do the other conjugation. We'll do nifal, pael, hitpael, hifil, passive conjugations, pual, hofal, the passive cal, and rare conjugations, and quadriliteral verbs. And then that's probably be where we'll end next week. And then after that, now we got verbs with objects, suffixes, and then we have different types of verbs. Weak verbs. It gives us a bunch of rules for all these different types of verbs. So yeah, we'll be doing verbs for a while. And then we'll try to recap on some of these things, some of the forms, some of the information for nouns I might redo, or because I'm not sure if we did them adequately. Like, let me see, where was it? It was the forms with only one consonant, two consonants, three consonants, forms with only one vowel, two short vowels, short first vowel and long second vowel. You see all these different types? I don't think we went through that. So we're going to try to go through those as well in the future. Not next week, but like maybe a month or two from now. So anyways, that's kind of what we're going to be doing in the next few weeks. So I hope you guys enjoyed this Hebrew study, and we'll continue more verbs next Thursday. And on Monday, this coming Monday, we will do some more practice. So thank you guys once again, and hope you guys have a great weekend, and Shabbat Shalom to you all. Yah bless, guys. Peace.